Hey, what's going on there, folks? Good morning, good afternoon. It is the Earthmaster back here on this end of the weekend, Sunday, July 30th, 2023. It's about 11:46 a.m. here, California time, West Coast. Latest earthquake activity. It looks like a 1.2 coming into Northern California. We did see a little bit of activity ramping up here across the Bay region overnight and this morning. Let's go ahead and check out some activity here happening just off of the Hayward fault system. It looks like a couple smaller quakes, although we did have a 3.6 down here in Morgan Hill, 5.9 kilometers below the surface. That earthquake was felt by a few folks there throughout the Bay Area, mainly around San Jose and the Morgan Hill area. Of course, a highly populated region, and that will, of course, in turn come out to a lot of responses, and that's what happened here from this little earthquake, 3.6 there around the Bay Area. Also a little bit of movement following that 3.6 further up north along the same fault system there, the Calaveras Fault. So keep an eye on this. Seen a little bit of migration of activity there across the Calaveras Fault and also the Hayward Fault in the last 24 hours. There's the one pointer coming in there to Petrolia. Now, I'm not for sure if that got picked up here on the station or not. It looks like that was a little bit ago, about an hour ago. And this thing does not go back an hour as far as the live seismograph stations go. But a little bit of activity occurring here outside of Eureka, just south of Eureka, to 1.8s. Rest of Northern California fairly quiet, aside from the Clear Lake volcanic field. And the rest of Southern California out here, a little spotty, not seeing any major movement kicking up here. One earthquake in the last hour near Palm Desert, 0.8. That's on the Pacific side of the plate boundary. The San Andreas Fault sleeps for now. Up across the Pacific Northwest, looks like we're getting a little bit more activity there across the Mount St. Helens area. Last night we did have a 2.2 coming into the northeastern region of the Volcano area. A ways away from it, though. It looks like maybe a couple miles or so to the northeast. Nothing spectacular going on far as activity at the crater region. Little small microquake activity here at the crater, though, around Mount Rainier. Very small microquake, though, 0.2. Yellowstone National Park over here, not a whole lot going on, but as always, I do want to double check and see what's going on across the Yellowstone area. And the latest map here shows a whole lot of nothingness. Maybe a little spike of an earthquake here, but overall, seismograph stations are fairly steady and stable. Not a whole lot of activity to report there for now. 3.3 there around the Texas area. Outside of Midland from yesterday. The rest of the country, one earthquake overnight here, or at least maybe early this morning near the Tiptonville, Tennessee area. This is the New Madrid seismic zone here, 1.9, 8.9 kilometers deep. Still seeing some activity ramping up here across the Middle America Trench and around the Caribbean plate here outside of Puerto Rico. Looks like the latest activity there is around the Puerto Rico area with a 2.8. See what we got specifically around this area overnight. I know we had quite a bit of earthquake activity ramping up here in the swarm. In the Gulf of Fonseca area. Looks like a lot of this activity is some older movement quakes now from yesterday. The EMSC is working. It is definitely working. And somebody asked me about the 6.8 that struck out there in Spain yesterday. Well, that was a phantom earthquake or a fake earthquake that the U.S., not the USGS, but the EMSC models tend to have been putting out. I believe it was this 3.7, but for whatever reason, they put it as a 6.8. And a 6.8 obviously would bring up a lot of signals across various seismograph stations. Doesn't matter where you're at on the Earth. Most large 6-pointers will show up on various seismograph stations, and we just did not see that. That's how I knew it was a fake phantom earthquake, just a error in the part of the EMSC. Which looks like they're working properly now. Their earthquakes are up here on the map, so let's go ahead and zoom in to the Gulf of Fonseca area. This is a region that has been seeing a earthquake swarm, pretty significant earthquake swarm. Now, this is the last 24 hours of earthquake activity here across this bay. couple volcanoes down south here, very close to the earthquake swarm. If we key in the last 48 hours, even the last week, we can get a better perspective. And of course, this grid pattern has to do with the where they position the epicenter of each earthquake. It's just how their program system separates it. It doesn't want to put it closer together. So the default spacing, so to speak, I think there's a different word for it, but the spacing in between these epicenters show a specific grid, but that's not the case. These earthquakes are not happening like this. It's just the way the EMSC has their models set up. But as you can see, backing out a little bit here, we did have quite a bit of earthquake activity there in the bay and also upstream here along the Middle America Trench. And this area in general has been relatively active, but I still think that we're looking at potentially the plate stress in this region awfully high. Whether there's going to be a large earthquake following all this movement or not remains to be seen. I think as long as that earthquake activity continues, that it's still noteworthy to watch some potential further large-scale activity in this region. Over the last hour, as you can see, 2 earthquakes here from the EMSC, a 2.8 and a 2.5, roughly within that same region where we've been noticing the swarm of activity. As you can see over the last 48 hours, though, it was spread out pretty nicely across different regions and also upstream. That's why this activity right here leads me to believe that this is nothing but stress amongst the Middle America Trench, which sits just offshore here. You can see the subduction zone in the oceanic crust, and that's exactly what's taken place there. I don't believe that's volcanic whatsoever. There was that 4.5 USGS reporting in that swarm of activity as well from yesterday. Also, some movement further upstream here along the Middle America Trench, a 5.6 and a 4.1. Regionally, again, this whole area has been quite active in terms of uptick here across the region for earthquake activity. So we'll continue to watch that. The area around Puerto Rico, there's some 2s. The last one was a 2.8. A couple 3s in there as well. A lot does take place over here across this area of the Caribbean plate due to movement across the Middle America Trench, kind of putting a squeeze over here on this little plate. All right, South America, a couple smaller earthquakes here in the last 24 hours. Let's see if the EMSC is reporting anything here. On the map, looks like some 2s and 3s in the white color rings, indicating some newer movement. There's that 1.2. There's a 3-pointer. Alaska. Looks like we did have a little bit of further activity overnight. That 4.9, though, up here along the Aleutian Trench, just after midnight, looks like USGS downgraded to a 4.5. 35 kilometers deep, and as you can see, low scattered activity here through the Cook Inlet up through Anchorage and the Denali area, all showing some slight uptick. Got to remember, though, that this is a major subduction zone. A lot of stress going on across the plate boundary here between the North American up here to the north and the Pacific plate here south of this red line. A lot of stress, and a lot of big earthquakes have taken place in that region, but for now it looks like a pretty good earthquake uptick in terms of microquake movement for now. Western Pacific, very, very quiet here across Japan and the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. If you look on this map here, we are still just very quiet all along the Western Pacific Ring of Fire. New Zealand, slight uptick going on down here. We'll check this out in a little bit. Because they did show a 4-point, it was a 4-pointer up here somewhere, North Island area. Well, we'll go ahead and cover them right now, but last night they had it up on the globe. It looks like maybe that earthquake has gotten taken down. Even if I were to go back a couple days here, that earthquake is no longer on the map. So sometimes these false earthquakes, these phantom earthquakes, pop up here on the globe. And the way to check and verify them, if there was actually a legit earthquake or not, is to go to the local seismograph stations here, even in New Zealand area. Now this 4.6 from yesterday, let's check that out, for example. That was at 10:41 p.m. local time there. I wonder if that's going to show it. That's around, there it is. That was actually a pretty nice signature. See that? Now that's what a 4.6 is going to look like. And I believe that earthquake was about 40 kilometers deep. So it showed up pretty nicely there across the region, right? All across the seismograph stations here in South Island, obviously, as well. That's a pretty, right? You can't miss it. So that's why I'm saying if there was a 4.8 occurring, they actually had a 4.8 on the globe just off the North Island coast last night. And I went over here to the maps in the last update and looked, and I could not see it. So, you know, if you're always wondering about an earthquake that may pop up on the globe, go to the seismograph stations for verification, or obviously if a lot of people are reporting some shaking, then you know it's a legit earthquake. Like this 4-pointer, I'm sure was felt by quite a few people. Let's see. How's 19,585 reports, right? You can't miss it. And it looks like that earthquake struck just outside of the Wellington region, right? Mostly around the Wellington area as far as the epicenter goes. So yeah, a good shaker, right? Right off of the, actually that's going to be right on the plate boundary, so to speak, because that alpine fault here extends to the south, but the boundary, the plate boundary itself between the the Pacific and the Australia plate here, all it looks like it may just be off of it a little bit, slightly inland. 4.3. So what was the see, these guys are reporting it at 4.6, USGS at 4.3, but looking at these drums here, definitely looks like it could be up in the upper 4 range. So I'm going to agree more so with the GeoNet servers on this one, just due to the the signature all across the area. Quite a few folks felt it, that's for sure. Since then, since that 4-pointer last night their time, really haven't seen too much uptick here. Things look very quiet. If you look following this activity, not a whole lot of movement. But we'll continue to watch that. It's been awfully quiet up north right now, all across the plate boundary through Solomon Islands and up through the Western Pacific. That's a good time there, I think, to watch other areas that really have not adjusted, and it may be waiting. We may be seeing some potential activity here across New Zealand a little bit further than the 4-pointer from last night, because that's awfully quiet. Look at that. Not too often do you see complete quietness here across this area like that. With it seems like just very minimal activity here across the Eastern Pacific. A lot of times we'll have that teeter-totter effect here between the two sides. Quietness over across the west, and then uptick here across the Eastern Pacific or adjacent plates, and that's just not happening right now. I'm not seeing any large-scale uptick across South America. Middle America Trench has been swarming for a little while, but I don't see the activity on the rise today. If anything, it looks like it's slightly lowering today. West Coast activity, yes, we do have a little bit of movement there around the bay, but not a significant uptick, so it's a little questionable, this eerily quietness here across the Pacific plate. We are getting a little bit of movement up here into China. This is around the plate boundary, or just off the plate boundary here. 4.8. They got this well north of India. 10 kilometers deep. This area has been swarming slightly with some earthquake activity over the last 24 hours. The Mediterranean, let's see what we got here across the region here. Looks like a 2.7 coming in right now, just outside the Turkey area, where we did see some further movement overnight. Looks like a 4-pointer in that mix as well. Some movement across the rest of the region. Again, nothing going on across Spain far as a 6.8 goes. I had a couple people emailing me, asking me about this large earthquake that supposedly took place over there, and that just was not the case. The EMSC models have been throwing out some false reports here occasionally, and it seems as though Spain is the area. Whenever they have a small earthquake up here, it throws it out as like a 6-pointer or above, and it's not. That's not what's really happening. So double check your sources if you happen to see a large earthquake on any map out there. So yeah, just going to be an interesting day to see what happens here. Let's go back here to the 7 days, 2.5 and above map. I want to look at maybe some potential quiet zones We did see quite the uptick here across the Vanuatu area. Remember, with this bouncing back and forth with deeper activity here around the trenches, that deeper activity triggers stress further along this plate boundary, but also upstream. And that's where we really haven't seen too much movement here upstream as far as shallower earthquake activity. So I think, if anything, this should fill in far as the stress and the buildup goes. So we'll watch this Kermadec Trench northward at the shallower levels for some movement today, I believe. As far as the live seismograph stations go, there's not a whole lot going on right now as far as earthquake activity, but definitely keep an eye on that region. Big Island of Hawaii has been active in terms of, well, the Pacific Plate. We're seeing a lot of these deeper quakes here on the northeastern side of the Big Island. That has a lot to do with the Hawaii Islands' weight on the Pacific Plate with the 45-kilometer depth there. Also over here a little bit further to the west, a couple earthquakes outside the Mauna Loa area. Those are relatively shallow. They're about 9 kilometers deep. And most of the movement, though, I would say around Pahala and a little slight uptick here across Kilauea Volcano. But we're not seeing any increasing flow of magma for now. That would obviously be a sign that, like, earthquake activity would be increasing, tilt meters would be rising. Right now we're at a steady level where everything is neutral. No major changes there at the volcanoes on the Big Island. Alrighty, let's see here. I think that's about it for earthquake activity. Space weather. Well, still continuing with this proton event here today. Although it looks like down on the southern polar regions, things are lighting up a little bit there. It's not a whole lot of, well, it's still in the blue, but it's not quite in the red like it is up here across the northern polar regions here on Earth. And that is the effects there on the ionosphere, the protons from a pretty large plasma eruption on the sun a couple days ago now. That's going to be from this area. That was back on the 28th, so this is day number 2. That hurled quite a few protons towards this area, sparking up that S2 radiation storm. And it should die down today. We should see this hopefully lower slightly, because that's been active like that for a couple days now. Looks like potentially a G1 class storm on the August 1st time period. We'll get into that possibly tomorrow a little bit further, as we can get a little bit better perspective of what is going on with that. I know we really haven't had any significant CMEs Earth-directed. This is more likely a glancing blow from one of these previous CMEs that were facing away from Earth. But far as sunspots go right now, and the UV filter ray, let's see here. Hold on a second here. 1856. That is right now. Not seeing anything really flaring there on the UV filter ray. A look at the magnetogram image here of the sunspots. This one's starting to fade away and separate. Notice that? That's not looking very active. It's large. It's a large sunspot, but it's not very active as far as the close proximity of those magnetic cores there in that sunspot. And this is just a jumbled up mess of really nothingness. I mean, there's obviously a lot of sunspot activity, but it does not look complex whatsoever. This is just a little disappointing today. I was hoping for these regions to get their act together and maybe produce a nice solar flare or two, along with a couple CMEs, spark up some auroras. But there's maybe this area right here. I don't know. It all looks like just a mess of sunspots, and even down here on the southern hemisphere of the sun looks pretty messy. So technically right now, as far as any sunspot that's worth watching, would be this one right here. Notice the complex closeness here of these magnetic cores in the sunspot, but that's about it. So it looks like right now, overall threat, 99% chance for a C flare, M flare at 55, X flare around 5% chance. But notice, overnight things are relatively stable here. We're just kind of keeping a neutral line in the low C flare category. Not really seeing any M's or anything pop up here. And that is due to the declining structures here within the sunspots. All right, weather outlook here today. As far as severe weather goes, there is an enhanced area. Looks like a 2% chance for tornado probability there in the green. Rapid City, South Dakota is in there, Wyoming, even portions down into the Scottsbluff, Nebraska area with a potential for tornadoes. I do believe the main threat, though, is going to be some large damaging hail out there, possibly in excess of 2-inch diameter. Or larger, right? Definitely larger than a 2-inch probability this time of year. So keep your cars inside. Not inside the house, but obviously in the garage, underneath the carport, somewhere safe, just in case one of these thunderstorms blow up over your house. Could drop some large damaging hail. There is a 30% chance of some high wind from these thunderstorms as well, mostly around the Rapid City, South Dakota area. Could see winds in excess of 65 miles per hour. All right, let's see. I think that's about it. No major changes out here for the California area. We'll check out the numerical models here. Somebody mentioning about a hurricane out in the Atlantic. So let's go ahead and see what we got here for the North American model here. I don't see anything major developing out here. It would show as a some type of organized system, but that looks like maybe potentially getting caught up with this this group of storms heading up to the north into that high pressure system. But far as anything heading into the Gulf Coast area and the East Coast, I don't see anything on the long range models for now. We got a couple different hurricanes here in the Pacific. Looks like that's very typical for the El Nino pattern here. Warmer waters heading off towards Hawaii, but I think right now most of those should die out as they enter into some of the cooler water. But for now, in the Gulf and the East Coast, things are looking pretty calm as far as any tropical development goes. Long range models here, this gives us a good indicator of high pressure and low pressure, right? Low pressure indicating cooler weather. This region up here indicating some hotter than average temperatures, warmer than average. Looks like around the 30th, end of July, some neutral conditions here across the West Coast. It really hasn't been that bad. I guess I've gotten acclimated. I don't like that word, but I've gotten used to the hotter temperatures. We're only going to peak out about 97 today here in California. And the long-range models show a deepening trough out here in the Pacific. That could create some ridging along the West Coast right there. And that is some hotter temperatures out here. I think we're supposed to be well above 100 here come the first week of August. A little bit of troughing out here across the eastern portion of the country with neutral conditions, which is probably a good sign. Some cooler temperatures heading into the Great Lakes area. Looks like the second week of August. So maybe this is good news. I like this map. Hopefully it stays like this. Cooler conditions out here across the west as well. Let's get rid of those high pressures. Not good. I want to see a bunch of blue on the map instead of a bunch of orange. I know a lot of people like that sunshine and warm temperatures, but I'm okay with sunshine and 70 degrees. That sounds about perfect. For me anyway. Everyone's got their subjective opinion when it comes to the weather and what is nice and what is awful. All right, folks, have a good one. Stay safe out there. It is Sunday. Again, very quiet conditions across the western Pacific, eastern Pacific, slight uptick here across California, around the Bay Area. And, still watching that swarm out here across the Gulf of Fonseca area. We'll see how today plays out. I still think we need to watch the upper stream here. Surface regions around the Kermadec Trench into the Tonga area. Surface earthquake activity. I'm not talking about trench movement, but I'm sure strains building up here across the plate boundary itself. Stay safe out there. We will catch you guys back here a little bit later tonight with the Sunday night update, if not sooner. Have a good one, folks.